It was a typical Tuesday afternoon at one of the busiest airports in the country. The terminal buzzed with activity as people rushed to catch their flights. Families with kids, business travelers in sharp suits, and tourists dragging oversized luggage filled every corner. Among them was a young mother traveling alone with her 2 children. She looked tired, juggling backpacks, snacks, and toys while trying to keep her little ones calm. Her son, who looked about 7 years old, kept tugging at her sleeve, complaining that his ears hurt from the noise. The flight they were boarding was heading to New York, a long journey ahead for anyone, let alone a mom managing 2 energetic kids. As she made her way down the narrow aisle toward their assigned seats, she felt a mix of relief and anxiety. Finally, they would be able to sit, buckle up, and hopefully relax for a bit. But when she reached row 15, something stopped her in her tracks. There, sitting calmly in the middle seat next to hers, was a man dressed neatly in a dark suit. He had a book open on his lap and wore reading glasses perched low on his nose. His presence wasn't imposing. He seemed quiet and focused. But his being there threw the woman off guard. That seat was supposed to be for her son. It was part of their reservation right next to her window seat. Now, instead of an empty spot waiting for her boy, there was this stranger occupying it. The woman froze for a moment, unsure how to react. Her son tugged harder on her arm now, asking why there wasn't any space left for him. "Mom, where am I going to sit?" he asked, his voice rising slightly. Other passengers shuffled past them, giving curious glances but not stopping. The pressure built inside her. This wasn't what she had planned for. Traveling with kids was already stressful enough without unexpected surprises like this. She took a deep breath and mustered the courage to speak. Clearing her throat, she leaned closer to the man and said politely, "Excuse me, sir. I think there's been some kind of mistake. That seat is actually meant for my son. Would you mind moving?" The man looked up from his book, clearly surprised by the request. He glanced at his own ticket stub, then back at her. After a brief pause, he replied calmly, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but this is my assigned seat. I don't believe I should have to move just because your child needs more room." His response caught her off guard. She hadn't expected resistance. In her mind, it was simple logic. Kids need extra care during flights, and surely anyone reasonable would understand that. But the man didn't budge. Instead, he gave her a polite smile and went back to reading his book, leaving her standing awkwardly in the aisle with her restless children. Frustration bubbled inside her. This wasn't fair. Why should her son suffer because someone else happened to get the same seat assignment? Feeling flustered, she decided to seek help. She flagged down a nearby flight attendant, hoping the crew could resolve the issue quickly. "Excuse me," she said, her tone firmer this time. "That man refuses to let my son sit in his rightful seat. Can you please do something about this?" At first glance, the situation seemed minor, a seating mix-up, nothing more. But as tensions began to rise, it became clear that this was about much more than just finding a place to sit. It was about expectations, fairness, and maybe even deeper issues lurking beneath the surface. For now, though, all eyes were on the flight attendant, waiting to see how she would handle the growing conflict. The flight attendant, a seasoned professional with years of experience under her belt, approached the situation cautiously. She had seen plenty of conflicts like this before. Seating mix-ups were common, especially on crowded flights. But there was something about this particular case that felt different. The tension in the air was palpable, and she could sense the frustration simmering just beneath the surface. "Let me check your tickets, please," she said calmly, addressing both the mother and the man in the suit. Her tone was neutral, almost soothing, as if trying to defuse the situation before it escalated further. The mother quickly handed over her boarding passes, pointing out the seat numbers for herself and her son. The man followed suit, producing his ticket without hesitation. After glancing at both sets of tickets, the flight attendant confirmed what the man had already stated. He was indeed seated in the correct spot. His middle seat was clearly marked, on his boarding pass matching the seat number on the plane. There was no mistake here, he belonged exactly where he was sitting, but the mother wasn't ready to back down. "I understand that's his seat," she said, her voice rising slightly despite her attempt to stay composed. But my son is only 7 years old. He can't handle being squished between two adults for hours. Can't you ask him to move? Surely we can find another solution." The flight attendant hesitated, caught between policy and empathy. On one hand, the rules were clear. Passengers were entitled to sit in the seats they paid for. On the other hand, the mother's plea tugged at her heartstrings. Traveling with kids was hard enough. Adding discomfort into the mix seemed unfair. Still, she knew she couldn't simply override the seating arrangement without considering fairness to everyone involved. Turning to the man, the flight attendant spoke gently but firmly. "Sir, I understand this is your assigned seat, but we often try to accommodate families when possible. Would you mind moving to another seat so the child can be more comfortable?" The man blinked, taken aback by the request. He adjusted his glasses and looked at the flight attendant, then at the mother standing nearby with her children. For a moment he didn't say anything, as if processing what he had just heard. Finally he responded, his voice calm but firm. "With all due respect, I paid for this seat just like everyone else. If accommodations are necessary, shouldn't the airline take care of it? Why should I have to give up my seat?" His words hung in the air, sharp yet measured. The mother flinched visibly, her cheeks flushing red. She hadn't expected such resistance, or perhaps she hadn't anticipated having to justify her request. To her, it seemed obvious. Kids came first. But now, faced with someone who refused to budge, she felt cornered and defensive. Before anyone could respond, another passenger nearby chimed in. A woman sitting across the aisle leaned forward and said loudly, "Ma'am, maybe you should have thought about this before booking separate seats for your family. It's not his fault your reservation got messed up." The comment hit like a punch. The mother turned toward the woman, stunned. "That's not true." She shot back, her voice trembling with emotion. "We didn't make any mistakes. This is our assigned seating, and I'm just asking for a little flexibility here. Is that too much to expect?" The exchange drew attention from other passengers, who began whispering among themselves. Some nodded sympathetically, siding with the mother. Others shook their heads, agreeing with the man in the suit. One person even muttered audibly, "This wouldn't happen if people planned better." The atmosphere grew tense, with tempers starting to flare. As the debate continued, the flight attendant tried to regain control of the situation. "Please, everyone, let's stay calm," she urged, raising her hands in a gesture of peace. But her efforts did little to quell the growing unrest. Passengers were getting restless, eager to settle into their seats and start the journey. Every second spent arguing delayed takeoff, and frustration was mounting. The mother, overwhelmed by the scrutiny and criticism, felt tears welling up in her eyes. She hadn't intended for things to spiral out of control like this. All she wanted was a smooth flight for her children, a small comfort after days of planning and preparation. Now she found herself at the center of a public spectacle, with strangers judging her every move. Meanwhile, the man remained silent, observing the chaos unfold around him. Though outwardly composed, he couldn't ignore the weight of the stares directed his way. Some looked at him accusingly, as if blaming him for refusing to yield. Others seemed sympathetic, recognizing his right to keep the seat he had purchased. Despite the pressure, he stayed resolute, unwilling to give in to demands he felt were unreasonable. For the flight attendant, the situation was becoming increasingly difficult to manage. She had dealt with similar disputes before, but rarely had they escalated to this level. Knowing she needed backup, she excused herself briefly and stepped away to radio the captain. Perhaps higher authority could provide guidance or offer a compromise that would satisfy both parties. As she walked away, the mother stood frozen in the aisle, gripping her son's hand tightly. Her daughter clung to her leg, wide-eyed and confused by the commotion. The man in the suit returned to his book, though his focus was clearly broken. Around them, the murmurs continued, each comment adding fuel to the fire. What started as a simple seating issue had transformed into something far more complicated, a clash of perspectives, expectations, and emotions. And while no one aboard the plane could predict how it would end, one thing was certain: the journey ahead promised to be anything but smooth. The flight attendant returned after speaking with the captain, her expression a mix of determination and unease. She knew she had to act quickly before the situation spiraled further out of control. Passengers were growing restless, glancing at their watches and exchanging impatient looks. The delay was becoming unbearable for everyone, and the tension in the cabin was thick enough to cut with a knife. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, raising her voice slightly to be heard over the murmurs. "We're working on resolving this issue as quickly as possible. Please bear with us for just a few more minutes." Her words did little to calm the growing unrest. A middle-aged man seated near the front called out sarcastically, "Maybe we should all get off the plane and let the drama play out." His comment drew scattered laughter from some passengers but only added to the mother's humiliation. She stood frozen, clutching her son's hand tightly while her daughter clung to her leg, wide-eyed and silent. Turning back to the man in the suit, the flight attendant tried again. "Sir," she said gently, "we understand your position and we respect that you paid for your seat. However, accommodating families is part of our policy whenever feasible. Could you please consider relocating to another section of the plane? We'd be happy to assist with that." The man hesitated, his jaw tightening ever so slightly. He glanced around the cabin, taking in the sea of faces watching him intently. Some looked sympathetic, others judgmental, and a few seemed indifferent. For a moment he appeared to weigh his options. Then with a deep breath he responded firmly, "I appreciate your request, but I don't see why I should have to inconvenience myself because someone else didn't plan ahead. I'm within my rights to stay here." His response sent ripples through the crowd. A young woman sitting nearby leaned forward and chimed in, her tone sharp. "Come on, it's not like you're losing anything by moving. It's just a seat. Think about the kid. He's probably scared and uncomfortable already." The man shifted uncomfortably in his seat, visibly irritated by the unsolicited advice. "It's not about the seat itself," he replied evenly. "It's about fairness. If every family could demand changes like this, where does it stop? What happens when someone else decides they want my seat too?" The debate was heating up, drawing more people into the fray. Another passenger, an older gentleman with silver hair, spoke up in support of the man. "He's right," the elderly man said firmly. "You can't expect him to give up what he paid for just because it's inconvenient for someone else. Rules are rules." On the other side of the aisle, however, a younger couple nodded sympathetically toward the mother. "She's traveling with kids," the woman said softly. "That's tough enough without having to fight for space. Can't we show a little compassion?" The conflicting opinions created a whirlwind of emotions inside the cramped cabin. Some passengers argued passionately, their voices rising above the hum of engines warming up outside. Others sat quietly, shaking their heads or scrolling distractedly on their phones, clearly annoyed by the delay. The mother, meanwhile, felt like the ground beneath her feet was crumbling. Every word spoken, whether in her defense or against her, felt like a direct blow. She hadn't imagined such a simple request would ignite such chaos. As the argument dragged on, the flight attendant stepped forward once more, attempting to regain control. "Everyone, please," she pleaded, her voice firmer now. "Let's try to keep things civil. We're doing our best to find a solution that works for everyone." Behind the scenes, the captain had been listening in via radio. After consulting with the crew, he authorized a compromise. The airline would offer the man an upgrade to first class, at no extra cost, to free up the disputed seat. It wasn't ideal, but it was the most practical solution given the circumstances. When the flight attendant relayed the proposal to the man. His eyebrows shot up in surprise. For a moment, he looked conflicted, weighing the pros and cons of accepting the offer. First class meant more legroom, better service, and a chance to escape the escalating tension in economy class. But it also felt like giving in to pressure, something he wasn't entirely comfortable with. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he nodded slowly. "All right," he said, his voice steady. "I'll move. But only because it's being offered, not because I feel obligated to do so." Relief washed over the mother's face, though it was tinged with guilt. She hadn't intended for the situation to escalate this far, nor had she wanted to force anyone out of their rightful place. Still, she couldn't deny the sense of relief that came with knowing her son would finally have the space he needed. With the decision made, the flight attendant sprang into action. She escorted the man to the front of the plane, where he settled into his new seat in first class. Meanwhile, the mother guided her children to their assigned spots, helping them buckle up and stow their belongings. As the plane prepared for takeoff, the cabin gradually returned to its usual hum of activity, but the emotional toll of the incident lingered. The mother sat quietly, staring out the window as tears welled in her eyes. She replayed the scene in her mind, questioning whether she had handled things correctly. Had she come across as demanding or unreasonable? Would others judge her for causing such a disruption? For the man, the upgrade brought a temporary reprieve from the tension, but it didn't erase the frustration he felt. He couldn't help but wonder if the outcome would have been different had he been someone else. Someone who looked different, perhaps. Was race a factor in how people perceived his refusal to move? These thoughts swirled in his mind as he sipped the complimentary drink offered by the first-class attendant. As the plane taxied down the runway, the atmosphere remained subdued. Conversations were hushed, and the usual excitement of departure was replaced by a collective exhaustion. Passengers exchanged glances, some still whispering about what had transpired. Though the immediate conflict had been resolved, its impact lingered, leaving behind a trail of reflection and unease. What started as a minor seating mix-up had turned into a lesson in human behavior, a reminder of how easily misunderstandings could spiral into something much bigger. And while the journey ahead promised smoother skies, the memory of those tense moments would stay with everyone aboard long after the flight landed. As the plane finally lifted off the ground, a heavy silence settled over the cabin. The earlier commotion had left everyone drained, and though the immediate crisis was resolved, the tension in the air remained thick. Passengers busied themselves, with magazines, earphones, or staring out the windows, but it was clear that minds were still replaying what had just happened. For some, the incident was already fading into the background, a minor inconvenience on a long journey. For others, however, it lingered like an open wound refusing to heal. The mother sat stiffly in her seat, her hands gripping the armrests as she stared blankly at the seat back in front of her. Her son had settled in beside her, happily munching on a snack pack she'd pulled from her bag, blissfully unaware of the storm his presence had inadvertently caused. Her daughter, too young to fully grasp the situation, rested her head against her mom's shoulder, dozing off. But the mother couldn't relax. Every glance from fellow passengers felt like judgment. Every murmur seemed directed at her. She replayed the confrontation in her mind, dissecting each word she'd said and wondering if there was something, anything, she could have done differently. What bothered her most wasn't just the argument itself, but the accusations that had surfaced during the heated exchange. Someone had accused her of being racially motivated, a claim that stung deeply. "That's not who I am," she whispered under her breath, tears welling up again. She hadn't even considered the man's race when making her request. It was purely about finding space for her child. Yet now, the accusation hung over her like a shadow, casting doubt on her intentions and leaving her feeling misunderstood. Across the plane in first class, the man leaned back in his plush leather seat, sipping a glass of water brought by an attentive flight attendant. Physically, he was comfortable, more so than he would have been in economy. But mentally, he was far from relaxed. The events of the past hour played on repeat in his mind, gnawing at him. He knew he had every right to stay in his assigned seat, yet part of him wondered if moving might have been the kinder choice. Was standing firm on principle worth the discomfort it caused? And why did it feel like the entire plane had turned against him? He glanced around the luxurious cabin, noticing the curious glances from other first-class passengers. Some nodded approvingly, clearly aware of the drama he'd left behind. Others avoided eye contact altogether, perhaps unsure how to react. Though grateful for the upgrade, he couldn't shake the feeling that accepting it made him look weak, as though he'd given in to pressure rather than sticking to his guns. It was a complicated mix of emotions: gratitude for the resolution, frustration over the circumstances, and lingering unease about how others perceived him. Back in economy, the debate among passengers continued quietly, albeit more subdued now, that the immediate issue was resolved. A group of travelers near the rear of the plane huddled together, whispering their thoughts. One woman, a mother herself, defended the mom's actions. "Traveling with kids is hard enough without having to fight for space," she said softly. "I get why she wanted her son to be comfortable." Her companion, a middle-aged man, shook his head. "Yeah, but you can't expect someone else to give up what they paid for just because it's inconvenient for you. Where does it stop?" Nearby, another passenger chimed in, his tone thoughtful. "It's not really about the seat, is it? It's about fairness versus compassion. Both sides have valid points, but balancing them is tricky." These conversations echoed throughout the cabin, reflecting the broader divide in perspectives. Some sided with the mom, seeing her struggle as proof of how challenging it is to navigate life with children. Others supported the man, arguing that rules exist for a reason and shouldn't be bent simply because someone finds them inconvenient. Still, a few took a neutral stance, acknowledging the complexity of the situation and the difficulty of finding a perfect solution. For the flight. Attendant. The ordeal was a reminder of the delicate balance they had to strike between enforcing policies and maintaining harmony. Lisa, the attendant who had handled the situation, felt particularly conflicted. On one hand, she understood the mom's concerns. She'd seen countless parents struggle to keep their kids content during flights. On the other hand, she respected the man's refusal to relinquish his seat without cause. In the end, upgrading him to first class had been the only viable compromise, but it left her questioning whether the airline needed clearer guidelines for handling similar disputes in the future. As the hours passed, the initial buzz of the incident began to fade. Passengers shifted their focus to movies, meals, or naps, eager to put the awkwardness behind them. The mother eventually managed to distract herself by helping her son color in a small activity book and answering her daughter's endless stream of questions about clouds and airplanes. Even the man in first class found solace in his book, losing himself in its pages as the miles ticked by. Yet, despite the outward return to normalcy, the ripple effects of the confrontation lingered beneath the surface. Social media, ever present in modern life, ensured that the story wouldn't remain confined to the plane. During a brief layover, the man posted a detailed account of the incident online, sharing his perspective while emphasizing the importance of empathy and understanding. His post quickly gained traction, sparking a flood of comments from people across the globe. Some praised him for standing his ground, while others criticized the mom for her perceived lack of consideration. Others still offered balanced views, highlighting the challenges faced by both parties. Meanwhile, the mom, unaware of the growing online discussion, wrestled with her own emotions. By the time the plane touched down in New York, she had resolved to reflect on the experience and learn from it. She realized that while her intentions had been good, her approach might have come across as entitled or dismissive. Perhaps next time, she thought, she could find a way to communicate her needs more effectively, or plan ahead to avoid such conflicts altogether. For the man, the incident reinforced the value of patience and grace, even in frustrating situations. As he disembarked from the plane, he decided to use the experience as an opportunity to spark meaningful conversations about fairness, privilege, and human connection. Little did either of them know that their paths crossing on that flight would leave a lasting impact not just on themselves but on everyone who heard their story. By the time the plane landed in New York, the initial shock of the seating dispute had worn off for most passengers. People gathered their belongings, stretched their legs, and prepared to disembark, eager to leave the cramped confines of the aircraft behind. But for two individuals, the mother and the man who had been at the center of the controversy, the day's events weren't so easily left behind. Both carried the weight of what had happened, replaying moments in their minds and wondering how others perceived them. The mother stepped off the plane last, holding her son's hand tightly while balancing her daughter on her hip. She moved slowly, avoiding eye contact with anyone as she made her way through the jet bridge. Her cheeks, still burned with embarrassment, even though no one around her seemed to care anymore. The airport buzzed with activity. Travelers rushing to connecting flights, families reuniting, and workers going about their routines. To everyone else, it was just another busy day at the terminal. For her, however, the world felt smaller, quieter, as if every step echoed louder than usual. She found a quiet corner near baggage claim and sat down, setting her kids beside her. As they played quietly with toys pulled from her bag, she pulled out her phone and scrolled absent-mindedly through social media. It didn't take long before she stumbled upon posts discussing the incident. Someone had shared details online, likely one of the passengers from the flight. Comments poured in, ranging from harsh criticism to supportive messages. Some accused her of being selfish or entitled, while others defended her actions, pointing out the challenges of traveling, alone with young children. Her heart sank as she read each comment. Though some words offered comfort, many were sharp and cutting, making her question whether she'd handled things the right way. Was she wrong to demand that the man move? Should she have accepted the situation without pushing back? These thoughts swirled in her mind, leaving her feeling more conflicted than ever. What started as a simple attempt to ensure her son's comfort had spiraled into something far bigger. A public spectacle dissected by strangers across the internet. Determined to set the record straight, she decided to post her own response. Typing carefully, she explained her side of the story, emphasizing her frustration and fear as a parent trying to make the best decision for her family. "I never meant to cause trouble," she wrote. "I only wanted my son to be comfortable during a long flight. I realize now that I could have handled the situation better, and for that, I'm truly sorry." Her apology struck a chord with readers. Many responded positively, thanking her for sharing her perspective and acknowledging the difficulties of parenting in challenging situations. Others remained critical, accusing her of deflecting blame rather than taking full responsibility. Despite the mixed reactions, she felt a small sense of relief after posting. At least she had spoken up, offering clarity where there had been confusion. Meanwhile, the man had already collected his luggage and was waiting for a ride outside the terminal. He scrolled through his phone as well, reading the growing number of comments on his earlier post. His account of the incident had gone viral, sparking heated debates about fairness, privilege, and racial bias. Some praised him for standing firm and refusing to give in to unreasonable demands. Others accused him of lacking empathy, suggesting he should have moved simply to avoid conflict. Reading these responses left him torn. On one hand, he appreciated the support from those who understood his position. On the other hand, the accusations of insensitivity stung, especially since he hadn't intended to come across as cold or unkind. Like the mother, he began drafting a follow-up message, addressing the criticisms head-on. "I understand why people are upset," he wrote, "but this wasn't about race or entitlement. It was about fairness. I paid for my seat just like everyone else, and I believe policies should apply equally to all passengers. That said, I recognize the importance of compassion and will always strive to find common ground in future situations." His words resonated with many, prompting thoughtful discussions about the complexities of human interactions. Some commenters admitted they hadn't considered both sides of the issue until reading his update, while others doubled down on their original opinions. Regardless of the feedback, he felt a sense of closure knowing he had contributed to a larger conversation, one that encouraged reflection and understanding. As hours turned into days, the story continued to spread online. News outlets picked it up, framing it as an example of the growing tensions between personal rights and collective responsibility. Talk show hosts debated the merits of each side, inviting experts to weigh in on topics like airline policies, parenting struggles, and societal expectations. Social media users chimed in with memes, jokes, and heartfelt reflections, turning the incident into a cultural moment that highlighted the intricacies of modern life. For the mother, the attention brought both validation and vulnerability. Friends and acquaintances reached out, offering kind words and sharing similar experiences of navigating parenthood under pressure. Strangers messaged her privately, expressing gratitude for her honesty and courage in speaking out. Yet, The negative comments lingered too, reminding her of the judgment she faced. It was a reminder that living in the age of social media meant putting yourself on display, for better or worse. The man, too, received messages from people around the world. Some thanked him for standing up for fairness, while others challenged him to reconsider his stance. A few even shared stories of times when they had been asked to give up their seats for children, elderly passengers, or individuals with disabilities. These anecdotes gave him pause, forcing him to confront the gray areas of morality and practicality. While he still believed in adhering to rules, he recognized the value of flexibility and empathy in certain circumstances. Despite the divide in public opinion, both the mother and the man emerged from the ordeal changed in subtle but significant ways. For the mother, the experience reinforced the importance of patience and clear communication. She vowed to approach future conflicts with greater thoughtfulness, seeking solutions that respected everyone involved. For the man, it served as a lesson in humility and grace. Though he stood by his decision, he acknowledged the need for balance between principle and compassion. As the days passed, the fervor surrounding the incident gradually subsided. Passengers from the flight returned to their daily lives, forgetting the drama that had unfolded thousands of feet above the ground. Yet for those directly involved, the memory remained vivid, a reminder of how quickly misunderstandings can escalate and how deeply our actions impact others. Though their paths never crossed again, the bond forged through shared adversity connected them in ways neither expected. Their story became a testament to the power of dialogue, encouraging people everywhere to reflect on their own behaviors and biases. In a world often divided by differences, it offered a glimmer of hope, that even in moments of conflict there is room for growth, understanding, and reconciliation. The days following the flight were a whirlwind for both the mother and the man. Neither of them had anticipated that an ordinary travel day would turn into a lesson in human behavior, sparking conversations across the globe. For the mother, life slowed down as she processed everything that had happened. The online attention was overwhelming. Messages flooded her inbox, ranging from supportive words to harsh criticisms. Some strangers offered advice on handling similar situations in the future, while others questioned her parenting choices or accused her of being self-centered. She spent hours scrolling through comments, trying to make sense of it all. At times, she felt defeated, wondering if she'd handled things poorly. Other times, she found solace in messages from fellow parents who understood her struggles. One woman wrote, "I've been there too. Traveling with kids is tough, and sometimes we say things out of desperation. Don't be so hard on yourself." Those words stuck with her, offering a small measure of comfort. Determined to grow from the experience, the mother decided to use the incident as a learning opportunity. She realized that while her intentions had been good, her approach might have come across as demanding or dismissive. She resolved to communicate more thoughtfully in the future, especially when emotions ran high. Instead of immediately asking someone to move, she thought about how she could phrase her request differently, perhaps by explaining her situation more clearly or offering alternatives up front. It wasn't just about finding solutions, it was about fostering understanding and mutual respect. For the man, the aftermath of the flight brought its own set of challenges. His post had ignited debates far beyond what he'd expected, drawing opinions from every corner of the internet. While many praised him for standing firm, others criticized him for lacking empathy. Some accused him of being stubborn, suggesting he should have sacrificed his seat without hesitation. Others argued that his refusal highlighted deeper issues of privilege and fairness. Reading these comments forced him to confront uncomfortable truths about societal expectations and personal biases. Despite the criticism, he stood by his decision. He genuinely believed that rules existed for a reason, and that bending them for one person could set a dangerous precedent. But he also recognized the importance of compassion. In hindsight, he wondered if he could have handled the situation differently, not by giving up his seat, but by engaging in a more empathetic conversation. Perhaps he could have acknowledged the mother's concerns earlier, showing that he understood her perspective even if he didn't agree with her request. These reflections stayed with him long after the flight ended. Both individuals began to notice subtle changes in their daily lives because of the incident. For the mother, interactions with strangers became slightly more cautious. She found herself overthinking simple exchanges, worried that others might judge her based on the viral story. At the same time, she grew more mindful of how her actions affected those around her. Whether it was letting someone go ahead of her in line at the grocery store or apologizing profusely for minor inconveniences, she made a conscious effort to be kinder and more considerate. For the man, the experience deepened his awareness of racial dynamics in everyday situations. Though he hadn't initially seen race as a factor in the seating dispute, the accusations leveled against him online made him reflect on how others perceived his actions. Was he treated differently because of his appearance? Would the outcome have been the same if he looked different? These questions lingered in his mind, prompting him to pay closer attention to how bias played out in his own life and the lives of others. He started having conversations with friends and colleagues about privilege, fairness, and the importance of listening to diverse perspectives. As weeks turned into months, the viral story faded from the headlines, replaced by newer controversies and trending topics. Life returned to normal for most people involved, including the passengers who had witnessed the drama unfold. Yet, for the mother and the man, the lessons learned remained etched in their memories. They carried the experience with them, using it as a reminder of the complexities of human interaction. In interviews and follow-up posts, both shared their takeaways openly. The mother emphasized the need for patience and clear communication, especially in stressful situations. "We're all doing the best we can," she said during one interview. "Sometimes that means stepping back and thinking before we act." Her words resonated with parents and non-parents alike, sparking discussions about empathy and grace under pressure. The man echoed similar sentiments, focusing on the balance between principle and compassion. "Rules matter, but so do people," he wrote in a reflective blog post. "It's not always easy to find the middle ground, but it's worth striving for. We live in a world where everyone has a story, and taking the time to listen can make all the difference." Their willingness to share their experiences inspired others to reflect on their own behaviors. Social media users posted stories of times they had faced similar dilemmas, sharing how they navigated conflicts and what they learned along the way. Teachers used the incident as a case study in classrooms, encouraging students to think critically about fairness, empathy, and accountability. Even airlines took note, revisiting their policies to better accommodate families and prevent similar disputes in the future. Though their paths never crossed again, the bond forged through shared adversity connected them in unexpected ways. Their story became a testament to the power of dialogue, highlighting how moments of conflict can lead to growth and understanding. For the mother, it was a reminder that vulnerability often brings connection. For the man, it was proof that standing firm doesn't mean closing yourself off to new perspectives. As time went on, both moved forward with renewed purpose. The mother continued raising her children, approaching challenges with greater patience and resilience. The man carried the lessons he'd learned into his professional and personal life, striving to be more mindful of the impact his actions had on others. Together, though apart, they proved that even in moments of disagreement, there is room for reflection, growth, and reconciliation. Ultimately, their story served as a mirror, a reflection of the complexities of modern life, where rules and relationships often collide. It reminded everyone who heard it that behind every action lies a human being, shaped by experiences, emotions, and aspirations. And while perfection may be unattainable, the pursuit of understanding and compassion is always worthwhile.